with a view from sitting on the fence. This is Backyard's Non-Tech channel. Hey, what's happening? We are sitting on the fence here at Backyard's Non-Tech channel, bit of a rant based off the last 72 odd hours here in Victoria. And unfortunately, Victorian public will bear the brunt of the abuse from the Australian public. By proxy, it's our fault, but it's not the public's fault right now for what's occurred. Victoria has a second wave of COVID-19 with something like 250 cases. Unfortunately, it has spread to the rest of the country. New South Wales has in excess of 50 new cases of COVID-19, the Northern Territory one that could explode. All because of the Victorian government's piss-poor handling of hotel quarantine. Now, the Australian public know what's happened. My international viewers may not. You see, Victoria voted to put in a hardline socialist left Labor leader, Daniel Andrews, who takes a page from the playbook of the Chinese Communist Party. Essentially, Andrews is from the socialist left of the Labor Party. And his ability to bring people along is terrible. He demands people do it rather than encourage. Victoria didn't use the ADF like the rest of the country did for hotel quarantine management. Oh no. We used private security guards. Explosive details have emerged of late that they had no training, they didn't have any idea about how to control infection, they weren't tested, and they went around sleeping with quarantined people, if you get my drift. AKA, they were screwing them. To avoid public backlash and a media backlash against the government is hidden behind a judicial inquiry now in order to avoid scrutiny. And it won't report until late September. We have a second wave. That second wave has now spread to New South Wales. New South Wales has asked the Victorian government for what the fuck are you doing? And can you give us an idea how the fuck you let this guy out of your hotel quarantine? He came into Australia, into Melbourne, spent 14 days in hotel quarantine. On the way out, didn't get tested, heads back to Balmain, Sydney. Now you've got a major supermarket in Balmain closed and the entire suburb being asked to get tested. Now, Sydney will blame Victorians for this. It's not my fault. First off, I never voted for Daniel Andrews in the first place. Second off, you can't blame the public for what's happened right now. The majority of the Victorian public has done everything it can. The government is the problem. And yet we will cop it from the country. Because the country is going to blame parts of metropolitan Melbourne that have done the right thing and the entire regional Victoria. We'll cop it. We'll cop the abuse directly from the rest of the Australian public. Even though it's not my fault, for example, and I certainly can tell you now, I did not vote for Daniel Andrews and the Labor Party. I'm a moderate. I'm in the middle. More often than not, I have voted for the coalition, both state and federally, on about 80% of the time. But I'll cop the brunt of the abuse. I will cop, me as a collective, will cop the abuse from the Australian public. Should we? No, but we will. The Australian public loves to kick a state when they're down. And Daniel Andrews has caused a massive economic collapse here in Victoria, where regional Victoria is battling. Metropolitan Melbourne is divided. Essentially, you have COVID apartheid now in Melbourne. We have caused a second wave of coronavirus. As Victorians, we have to take responsibility for that. It's not our fault. But Australians love to kick a guy that's down sometimes, especially Queenslanders. New South Wales and WA love to be able to kick other states when they're down. Victoria will never be the powerhouse it is. Daniel Andrews has ruined Victorians' reputation. We're a divided state. As much as I hate to say this, I don't want anyone from Melbourne anywhere near Geelong. Stay the fuck away. I'm saying that for my own health, I'm saying that for the other half's health, and I'm saying that for Geelong and the Bellarine. Don't fucking come down here. Stay there. We've got massive student outbreaks in Melbourne. Student-to-student outbreaks within schools, especially in the hot zones of Melbourne. We have an active case here in Geelong. We don't know whether or not it's spread. Daniel Andrews will not allow the ADF to run hotel quarantine around the state. He's asked the Department of fricking Justice and the Sheriff's Department to do something about it. What a waste of fucking public money that is. The federal government is very concerned about the state of play. Daniel Andrews, I know that the Federal Minister for Health is extremely concerned on two reasons. Number one, he's the Federal Minister. Number two, he's a Victorian. He has grave concerns about what's happening here in Victoria. Now, while the rest of the country laughs at us and is angry with us for causing a massive second wave that'll cripple the economy, it's not my fault. It's not regional Victoria's fault, because all this came out of Melbourne. But we will be blamed. This is why Victorians are not allowed anywhere else in the country. You see, the general principle is that if I go from here to New South Wales, I will be assumed to have come from Melbourne, not regional Victoria, not Greater Melbourne, which I am not in Greater Melbourne. I'm 60 kilometres from Greater Melbourne. I think that's enough social distancing, is it not? And yet, we will cop it. We will cop the brunt of the blame for what has happened. I don't want people from Melbourne anywhere near Geelong, and I'm sure most of regional Victoria doesn't want anyone from Melbourne. Queensland will gain economic benefit out of this. Massive economic benefit. And Daniel Andrews is hole smashing and turning Victoria into an apartheid state. Because now you've got hatred of Melbourne. You've got many Victorian towns pleading with Melburnians to stay home. You've got the possibility of more postcodes being added to massive hot zones. And a Premier who's lost control of the entire situation. You've got a Health Minister who's inept here in Victoria. I back the calls for her to be sacked. You've got a Chief Health Officer who's hiding behind the judicial inquiry as well. You've got AHPPC now scrambling to figure out what the bloody hell went wrong here in Victoria. You've got New South Wales extremely concerned. You've got Queensland fuming. And now the Northern Territory's pissed off. So we have a second wave here in Victoria that has spread to New South Wales and the Northern Territory. Or to be more specific, Victoria has a second wave that has spread to metropolitan Sydney. And that is our government's fault. And yet, the Victorian public will get the blame. By proxy, because we elected a hardline socialist left ALP dictator who took a page out of the CCP's playbook. We're a conservative state. We're not a socialist state, and yet we're becoming one. We have COVID apartheid in the state now. Many places don't want Melburnians because of the problems at Ridges Hotel, the Stamford Plaza. We've had trouble here in Geelong with hotel quarantining as well. There's 71 cases in Geelong that I'm aware of. One active, but a total of 71 cases of COVID-19 here in Geelong. Surf Coast isn't much better. Sorry. I said this channel will be raw. There won't be any hiding anything. We were a friendly state. We're not now. I would love to go back to Melbourne. I'm too scared. And living in regional Victoria, I don't want to run the risk of getting that virus. At the same time, we have caused a second wave in the country because Daniel Andrews won't let the Australian Defence Force help because of his ideological principles that Victoria can do this by itself, or we can't. We're fucked. A worker was quarantined here in Victoria. He got out after 14 days, no follow-up tests. He was assumed to be clear. He gets back to Sydney, goes to work at Woolworths in Balmain, and now he's got it. There's a case in Darwin, same thing. Came to Melbourne. Piss poor hotel quarantine, goes back to Darwin. They've got cases. Queensland's COVID-free. WA's COVID-free. South Australia might be. But now we've caused a huge second wave through New South Wales. Gladys Berejiklian is not going to get the answer she wants. Why? Because Daniel Andrews will say, I can't talk about anything because it's in front of a judicial inquiry now. He doesn't want the backlash. Australia, on behalf of Victoria, I apologise. It's our fault. It's not our fault directly. But I think every Victorian needs to apologise to the rest of the country for causing what is essentially going to be an economic catastrophe. The federal government can't close the borders. The only way they can do that is to pull the Constitution out from under every state's feet. It's just, it's fucking piss poor. There's no other way to describe it. And yet, there's no responsibility from the government. They're blaming the security guards. The security guards are blaming the government for no training. Now the sheriffs are gone in. What the fuck are they going to do? It's just, another kick in the guts for Victoria. The AFL's up the shit. The NRL's up the shit because they can't play games here. We're having to leave. Victorian teams are going to have to leave the state. North Melbourne had to relocate a heap of players to get them out of the hot zones in Melbourne. And there's no responsibility from the Victorian fucking government. Australia, as a Victorian, I apologise for causing what could be an economic catastrophe. Even though it's not my fault personally, I certainly did not vote for Daniel Andrews, or the Labor government for that fact. I never have. Sure, I've agreed with a couple of their policies, especially around mental health and trying to put mental health back under disability, but it's not. But now you have the whole of the Victorian Labor Party is on the socialist left side of the ALP. You've got inquiries linking many ministers around the country to close ties with China. Victorian, I apologise to the country. It's not my fault per se, but someone's got to apologise. The government won't. Now they've put themselves behind a judicial inquiry, they can absolve themselves completely. They basically absolve themselves of all responsibility because they're behind a judicial inquiry, which means they can't say anything. That's the whole idea. You put yourself behind a judicial inquiry, you've got to keep silent. You have no choice. Because it's now in front of a former judge. Chief Health Officer can't say anything either. Neither can the Health Minister, neither can the Police Minister, neither can the Premier. Neither can the Minister for Employment and Jobs and Innovation. He can't say anything. No one can say anything. Once you get a judicial inquiry going, a cone of silence. So even if the public want the answers and even if the media want the answers, they can't get them now. Because the government just does this and absolves itself completely of any responsibility. The timing's interesting. September. The end of September. Now, my Aussie viewers, it's about the same time everything stops working here, doesn't it? All the stimulus packages finish in September. It's interesting to see that Daniel Andrews has also said the inquiry is to come out at the end of September. Conspiracy here somewhere? I don't know, but it definitely sounds like it. Australia, as a Victorian, I apologise for the second wave that's going to rip through the country. And to Queenslanders, I know that far north Queensland would love to have Victorians up there. They rely on the Victorian tourists. I think you should ban Victoria for a long time. I wouldn't want to be in your shoes up there at the moment. And I don't think any Victorian would want to come anywhere near like Queensland at the moment, even if we are from regional Victoria. And you've got to remember, regional Victoria is far better off. There's only a few cases, active cases around regional Victoria. There's probably 2 or 3. But the fact is, where I come from, I don't want to go to FNQ because they can't afford for a Victorian to come up there. Yes, they need it for the tourism dollar. Many Victorian four-wheel drivers go to far north Queensland, they go up the Cape. You got to ban us. You can't have us. You want to save that area of Australia, you have to ban Victorians. Even if they are from an area that is completely COVID-free. You can't have us. Same with New South Wales. New South Wales loves Victorian tourists. You know, hop across the border. You can't have us. The only way we can fix this problem, and the only way that Victoria can get on top of this, the federal government must take control of the situation. Use the Constitution against Victoria and overthrow it. Unfortunately, our governor, the Victorian governor, is a socialist as well. So you're an uphill battle. Socialism doesn't work. You can see it now. We have COVID apartheid. We have a state that doesn't want anything to do with metropolitan Melbourne. We have a country that wants nothing to do with the state of Victoria. And yet, the rest of the country is opening up. This plays into Daniel Andrews' hand beautifully because now he's got complete control of the state of Victoria and its destiny. And we're going downhill. I apologise to the country for causing what essentially will be the second wave. New South Wales was practically free So was Queensland, so was the Territory, so was WA, so was New South, so was SA, so was Tasmania. Sorry, Australia. As a regional Victorian, I know it's not directly my fault, but no one else is going to apologise to you. I don't want anyone from Melbourne anywhere near Geelong. I'm sorry, it's too risky. The virus is spreading that quick. It wouldn't take much to go from Wyndham Vale to Mornington. Once that happens, you wipe out the whole of Metro Melbourne. Daniel Andrews is losing popularity, but the government's not. The problem is people can't see the damage. Regional Victoria can. What do we do? Can't do anything, can you? We fucked up. Even though a vast majority of Victorians have done the right thing, we have given up so much. The initial outbreak was caused by bloody Ramadan. 2 huge Muslim families who knew the rules, but because it was happening in the Muslim realm, they decided that the gatherings didn't apply to them. No one will blame anyone. What will happen is Australians will kick Victorians. They will kick the state while it's down. Do they have the right to? They probably believe they do, but we're hurting. Where I live, there is no active cases. None. But I don't want to go to New South Wales. I don't want to go to Queensland. Because you're assumed right off the meat of the bat to be from a hotspot. Because no one can decipher between Victoria and Melbourne. If I go to Albury, I'll get in. I go to Sydney, I'm assumed to be from Melbourne, and therefore I'm turned back. We will never recover from this as a friendly state, because we will be forever besmirched with causing a massive second wave. 50 cases in New South Wales, and now an entire suburb being pleaded with to get tested. It's not my fault. I'm not responsible for the outbreak. But this country will blame Victoria. And the media will make sure of it. So as much as I know there are a number of four-wheel drivers here in Victoria that would love to get up to FNQ, don't let them in. I know 3 of them are in parts of Victoria that have never seen COVID-19. But you can't have us. I know you need the tourism. You're going to have to rely on the rest of the country. The whole of the rest of the country is going to have to rely on the country. You can't rely on us Victorians. Yes, we have COVID apartheid here in Victoria because of piss poor management by the government, putting private fucking security guards who've got no medical training, they've got no idea about infection control, and they've got no idea about PPE. And they're fucking having sex with quarantined people. For fuck's sake. And yet the government's hiding behind a judicial inquiry so they don't have to answer questions. Again, Australia, I am sorry. I apologise. I apologise on behalf of regional Victoria and part of Melbourne and our government, because they won't apologise to you. But as I've said, Australians love to kick people when they're down. And that's exactly what they're going to do to Victoria. Because we have caused a second wave. It's not an outbreak. It's a second wave. 250 something infections with another 80 on the cards today. 50 in Balmain. That could explode to 150, 200, 300, 400, 500 cases. It's bullshit. I don't give a fuck. Why, as Victorians, we have to take responsibility, I don't know, but we will. Daniel Andrews has done what he wanted to do. He's scared the state stiff. We're all frightened. You're never going to recover from it. Australia will. New South Wales, Queensland, Northern Territory, South Australia, Western Australia, Tasmania and the ACT will recover. We won't. We'll never recover from this. Even if you do have, 4 weeks of 0 cases. The damage is done. The reputation is stuffed. Internationally and nationally. It's probably best to declare Victoria a bio-waste zone. Anyway. That's the state of play. Sitting on the fence, looking about what's happening. Head back to my main channel, Backyard Tech. We've got some videos coming up for you later on. Have a good one. Take it easy.